Welcome everyone to the March 28th meeting of the Curiosity Guild, aka Research and Learning, and as part of the Lifeboat Academy. And this is our second meeting, actually, as the newly formed Research Guild. So we're still kind of getting our feet under us. And as is our custom, I will start the meeting with land acknowledgement. And we start in the words of Norm Leach. We start with the land acknowledgement because the land was here before we were, and the land will continue to be here long after we are gone. And everything that we know and need and experience comes from the land and returns to the land. And so in acknowledging the land and starting from this perspective, we are honoring deep ancient indigenous traditions that arose in many different cultures around the world and which recognize our place in the bigger picture. Recognize that we are not separate from nature. We are nature. Nature is us. And recognize that we live in an interdependent and interconnected world where there is no way that we can act that doesn't affect all our relations. And so we can either act mindfully or mindlessly. And so we take a moment to remind ourselves of the simple reality that we are interconnected and use that for our own advantage, ultimately. And in doing so, we also recognize that among all of our relations, some of those relationships have been injured, have been harmed. And so part of our work is to repair harms where they have happened, to do what we can, when we can, where we can, to make things a little bit better, and at the very least to make sure that we aren't making things any worse. And so we try to be mindful and caring and recognize the impact of our work together. Yeah, and so I will specifically mention that I am on the lands that have been tended historically by the Wasanic, who are part of the Coast Salish peoples, and yeah, who are still my neighbors, who are still here among us, who are still working to be in right relationship with their settler neighbors and with themselves, and to rediscover and revitalize their culture. And yeah, just to be aware that this is not some sort of historic thing. This is here now, real, live. And with that, I invite us just to take a moment to ground ourselves a little bit. So as you are comfortable where you are, to the degree that it feels right, I invite you just to take a moment to settle yourself in, catch your breath, feel what it's like to be a body in the landscape. Take a moment just to feel the weight of your body pressing down on the seat beneath you. To become aware again of your breathing, your breath, which is always with you, and which is always a form of reciprocity. Breathing in oxygen produced by our green relatives, breathing out carbon dioxide, which then fuels them. Fresh energy coming in and relaxation and release on the out breath. So just take a few breaths, mindful of the new energy entering on the in breath, the oxygen as it hits your bloodstream and travels to every cell. And on the out breath, letting go of what no longer serves you, letting a little relaxation happen, shoulders relaxing, your face relaxing. A moment to appreciate the bird song. And when you're ready in your own time, just take one more deep, refreshing breath in and let go of whatever you can that keeps you from being present today. And thank you for providing birdsong. All right. So we'll have an opportunity for a check-in. And the way I see it, it is Angie, Justin, and Fee to the degree that she would like to, and then Roland and me. And I think it's still close enough to equinox, and the days are still noticeably longer. So I'm gonna do a daylight kind of question, which is, um, yeah, where's the light shining from in your life? Where does there seem to be more light these days? And over to you, Angie.
Um, my initial thought was like orientation in like physical orientation. Where is it coming from? And right now the sun is pretty much like right above us. And even yesterday with the sprout on the ground of the forest, I felt like the sun was right above me. So that was my initial thought. Physically, where is the sun coming from or shining on me? As to where it's coming from, where is it coming from in my life? I thought of thee, and then I thought of like the little like Teletubby sun, like the little Teletubby sun baby. um, and I felt like that was pretty accurate. Um, yeah, I passed to Justin.
Yeah. I feel like I I don't know if it's nerding out, but I always say like noon is solar noon, and then the 12 o'clock folks always get confused at what I'm talking about when I say it's noon because it's since time change, it's around 1 o'clock now. The sun's highest in the sky. Um, and it was nice to just like we decided to do the meeting outside because the sun we got periodic like full sun. Um, yeah, it makes me think of my reflections from um, winter solstice and like just seeing that like things put their energy into their seeds and their roots in order to survive the winter. And I kind of thought about that a lot. Like, what is my root and where does my energy go so I can get through this period of less light? Um, and in my obsessive fashion, it was all like social unit related and small band related, and I just saw like ancestors, especially like the Lancestors, like the Secwepemc people of this place, going into a big roundhouse, and kind of like the relationship between them, um, getting them through. And I do think the absence of that kind of cohesive connection between people is at the root of a lot of the poly crisis. Um, and so yeah, like the answer to that question, like where does my energy go into the winter, was into it like an absence, because it feels like my center, what should be my center, is absent, and I deal with that every winter. And yeah, where the sun is coming from in my life is definitely my little unit, and especially Fee, because yeah, she's still like in tune with nature. She's still hearing that natural voice. She's still like just instinctual, and we're trying really hard to like be responsive to her cues and yeah, keep her level. That's me. Pass to Roland.
That way. Over to Ben.
Mr. Literal. Where is the sun coming from me? You know, sun's coming from me is actually tomorrow is a day off. That's where that's where the light is shining. I'm sputtering into the end of the week with whatever energy is left in the gas tank. And so yeah, my light right now is coming from the prospect of a little bit of hibernation and renewal. It is nice actually. It's I'm always surprised at, and I guess this is part of the renaturalization, is my mind thinks that days get longer and days get shorter, you know, and there's a sort of like every day they're a little longer and then every day they're a little shorter. And the experience is days get short and are relatively short for a long time. And then all of a sudden days get really long and then they stay long for a long time. And so this time of year when it seems like all of a sudden it goes from dark all the time to light is always kind of surprising and disorienting in a way, you know. And we're solar timed in that we've got chickens to put to bed and to get up, and this is the time of year when I'm always like having to force myself to remember what time, like to plan ahead for when to put the chickens to bed, because it just keeps, it's like from one week to the next, it's different. Well, cool. All right, so we've had a chance to check in with each other, and next up is to look at our agenda. And since we are relatively early days in this guild, kind of figuring out what we're all about, our agenda right now is pretty simple. The big project that we have to work on is the setting up the badge system. And to the degree that I've had this sort of personal project of extending this, what I'm calling the research project, which is also something that the guild can take part in, be interested in. But really what we have on our list was taking some time to review our agreements in the guild, just to make sure that we are working together the way that works for everyone who wants to be part of it. And then talking through the badge project and what that would look like moving forward. So those are the kind of the proposed items on the agenda. And we will go once around just to see if anybody has anything else that they want to add to the agenda. So over to you, Angie.
I don't have anything to add. Justin.
I have nothing to add either. Roland.
I guess under the continued discussion of seasonal priorities, I wouldn't mind having another sort of like brief overview of the research project proposal. You know, I see in the action items from the last meeting, follow up on email to potential research partners, and just as a reminder of what is it and what's the scope kind of thing. So to you, Ben.
So yeah, that makes sense. And let us start with a review of our agreements. And for context, I will say we have developed kind of what I think of as the shorthand list of agreements of you have choice. Nobody has to do anything. I wonder if I can remember them off the top of my head. So we lead with kindness, gentleness, curiosity. Nobody has to do anything. This is a non-coercive space. Speak your truth, speak from the heart, what's true for you for now. We are both and keep things light, enter into the spirit of playfulness when possible. Keep things light is the wrong, that's a shorthand. We can talk about anything, but it is helpful to bring us a sense of lightness and playfulness to it, even when we're talking about heavy things. Well, I was just trying to test myself, and I think I got 5 out of the 7. But those are something that we offer up as an easy starting place, and which generally seem to work. But really, the key is we shape together how we want to work together. And so the agreements are about how we want to be in the meeting space together and with each other, so that we all feel like we can contribute and participate. So I think it probably is just worthwhile to just go around and say, are there any things that are really important to you in terms of how we share this space with each other? And we can start to generate that list of what's important to us. And does that make sense? Any questions about the process, or should we just dive into it? Okay. Then Angie, over to you. What are some things that are important to you in terms of how we share this space together?
I think it's just pretty much a reiteration of what I said yesterday, which I heard in the list of basic agreements, which is openness. When I feel like I'm being approached with openness, I feel more comfortable sharing, and therefore I feel safer to be more creative and playful, which I also liked. The other agreements of entering playfulness when able, even when talking about the heavy stuff. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add, but those were the 2 things that really stood out for me, that are important for me. Over to Justin.
I've been thinking quite a bit, and my thinking has made me more confused, not more clear, on like the purpose of the agreements, and like having gone to the agreement circle, having gone to multiple Heartwork and Philosophy guild meetings, like just yeah, been really reflecting on what the agreements are for. And yeah, I was just thinking like a basic would be to like kind of like curiosity and openness, but like how to unlock the genius in all of us, and to know that each of us are have gifts and hold gifts and bring gifts, and that if the agreements are right, those will come forth. and not only like that in finding that individual genius, but the collective genius. I don't know how that's an agreement or how that's to show up, but I guess, yeah, in agreement with the agreements and curiosity and whatnot, pass to Roland.
I think for myself, the agreements, I use them as reminders of how best to be with other people and with myself. And with that in mind, I wanted to acknowledge that Justin, your haircut looks awesome, and also that getting feedback is good in terms of how I am with other people, because I don't always know. We just had an experience with the last woofer where they thought we were upset with them, and we had no idea what they were talking about. So them actually expressing that and said, "Do we need to have a little chat?" Was really good, because we were able to say, no, we don't. If we do need to have a chat, it's to let you know that there's no issue here. And the last thing is do for yourself what you would do for others. And over to Ben.
Yeah. I yeah, I have a ditto on Justin. Like that is, we share a similar idea about what's the purpose, and it really is how one of the quotes that I like to use a lot is the goal is to weave together our strength in such a way that our weaknesses become irrelevant. And in part, that is also recognizing we all have weaknesses. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. And so along with the curiosity and openness, a word that's been coming up a lot for me lately is humility. And I think you can't have curiosity without humility. And so, and ultimately, it is really just how do we make space for each other? And well, and then that also, it's one of the ones I didn't note, but listen first for understanding is also one of our standard agreements. And for me, that's always about, there's an expression about in the West, we don't listen so much as reload. And, it's like a lot of people are listening to counter argue what they hear, as opposed to really trying to listen beyond the words. What is it that someone is trying to communicate? And I think that's part of that curiosity and humility. But yeah, ultimately it's all for the same purpose, which is how do we make a space where the best of each of us shows up and is welcomed? Yeah. So I'm going to add humility to the list, and we generally we have a fairly common practice of doing a share round and then a response round, just to give everyone a chance to bounce off of what they heard. So we've all had a chance to kind of add some agreements, and the next round is, now that you've heard what other people are adding, do you have anything that is coming up for you, any things that you're noticing, any new ideas to add forward? So Angie, over to you if Angie is there.
I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a frustrating bit. My dog freaked out about the neighbor's dog, so we missed some of Roland's share, which I wish I hadn't. Yeah, I want to philosophize and talk at length about certain things. I don't know. I don't think this is the space, but it'd be cool to do another one-on-one and yeah, the agreement stuff is amazing, and it's one of those things like I didn't think a whole lot about before getting into the Lifeboat Academy, and like once you do start reflecting on it, it's like, oh yeah, it's obvious. Like why didn't I think of that? Pass to Roland.
I don't have anything to add. So over to you, Ben.
Me too. I feel pretty complete on this. So we'll move into the rest of the agenda. And the first request was an overview of the research proposal. And I'm going to try, I will be looking for cues if I'm starting to get too into the weeds. And in part, it's hard because it's still kind of a very much emerging project, an emerging idea. What came, basically, I'm involved with a lot of groups as part of the work that I do with the Lifeboat Academy, plus also just other work that I do. And I was noticing a pattern in a number of the groups that I'm with, where they're kind of membership groups, and they are all talking about how do we engage our members. And I think that's where the treating life as an experiment part comes in. Well, it's also all of these, the groups that I'm talking to are all kind of networks of networks. And so with overlapping interests that are similar but not identical. And so part of the research proposal is using the idea of doing some collective research as an excuse, actually, because I guess really because I'm trying to figure out how to get other groups to be more curious about their members and what their members need in particular. Because a lot of times there is a kind of like some core group develops some ideas about what we think the members need, and then we push that out, as opposed to being curious about what members are actually struggling with. And so the idea was that we all together, like all of the core groups, support each other in reaching out to our membership to do interviews where the primary question is, and it's in the spirit of creating a mutual support network. So the key question is, what are you trying to accomplish? What feel like your major challenges in accomplishing that? And what are some things that you can offer to support others? And while that's really useful, so it's two parts. It's one is, I think, just having those conversations, having an excuse to set up some time to have a conversation with people about what they're doing is valuable. And trying to figure out how we can connect the dots between what are some things that one network can be offering, because all of the networks have their own challenges, but they also have something going on. So what is it that one network can offer to others, and how can we kind of cross-pollinate? So I think that's the main idea, is that it's the research project is a collaboration among a number of networks, and we support each other in reaching out to the membership in those networks to do that, basically to do a kind of a needs and strengths assessment. So I think I'll stop there and then just send it around to see if there are questions. So I'm not sure what's going on in the interior there, but over to Angie and folk. So questions or ideas or thoughts? And you're muted.
On how to engage like more people into
I'm
the
sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
how to engage more people in the lifeboat. Is that what we're kind of going off of?
Well, the research project actually would be like co-sponsored. It wouldn't just be the Lifeboat Academy. It would also be a couple other organizations that we have relationships with. So it wouldn't specifically be about getting more lifeboat people engaged, but more engagement in any of these networks.
I don't know. I feel like it comes down to word of mouth or marketing. And if like working any job has taught me anything, it's that your word of mouth recommendation is so valuable. Even like how we got into the lifeboat was through Amir, somebody that we trusted that enough to explain what we're trying to do with our lives, and somebody who was able to internalize that and then think of more resources for us to explore. I hope that's relevant. I passed to Justin.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, like the research is a network of networks where we prompt or provide support for each network to go into their membership and do interviews about what their projects are, what are obstacles getting in the way, and then what are the strengths that they may be able to support others with. And then, so this prompt on this circle was which? Sorry.
This is just questions for clarification.
Okay.
And observations.
Yeah, I no questions at this point, Pastor Long.
It just occurs to me that there's in talking about word of mouth, I could see that part of this is the employing the trickster principle, and that's a phrase we often use to indicate sort of benign. I don't know how to say it, benign misdirection, maybe. So that in having project partners and interviewing organizations is also, we are also introducing even just the idea of or ideas that are more or less intrinsic in the Lifeboat Academy. And I can see how this is this naturally comes out of the help desk idea, or the portion of the Lifeboat Academy, and that and even just with the cohort, different people with different experiences, looking to build a project, and in sharing, starting to create, open up possibilities of getting help or information from the others who may have experience or blah 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 blah. So this feels like it's a larger version of the cohort, and introduced in sort of a trickstery way, sort of creating opportunity for project partners and organizations to then pool their put their resources in this growing pool. So over to Ben.
Yeah, and I think there's thanks for bringing up the trickster principle. And my experience has been through my interpretation, right? So, but in my paid work, I do evaluations for organizations, and I have discovered, even though the concept is, like, you get clear on what you're trying to accomplish, and then you measure how it's going, and then you use that feedback to improve what you're doing. Everyone kind of nods along with that, but there is huge resistance to it, to actually doing it. And I think this is a game A, game B kind of thing. I think this is the wounding of our educational system, where, everyone's afraid that they're going to fail the test. And teacher's going to mark you down. And so there's this big resistance to, well, Roland, you were talking about feedback as one of the agreements, and there's a lot of pushback on gathering feedback, because, well, what if they say bad things? And so, yeah, I think that's where a lot of the trickster stuff is around that. Well, and the other side too, which is people are afraid to ask for help often. There's like, that's a sign of weakness. And we all also tend to oversell our strengths and capacity, because we want to, kind of appear strong and whatever. So that's why I was using the research language as a way of kind of opening it up, kind of getting people to take a step back from it and be less tight around it. So yeah, that's definitely in there. And the other thing too is, and I didn't mention it, but I think I said it last time, but there's a direct connection between the badge process and the research, because I think a lot of this is about identifying what are the tools that are useful to lots of people in lots of projects. That what is it that we offer that might be useful to somebody else, and what are some of the tools that they offer that might be useful to us, and having an inventory, like a menu that you can draw from, would just be really, having that resource would be really useful. So I feel like, and this was really, the idea was, well, we're just kind of doing an overview of this. So I'm going to do once more through to see if there are any additional questions or observations. And then I'm going to propose that we move into the badge, talking about the badges next. So over to you, Angie.
Sorry, it's very hard to stay present when you have a baby who needs to eat and pee. So I missed a lot of that, and I apologize. But because of that, I have nothing to add. I pass to Justin.
Yeah, in my fashion, I'm thinking of ancestral context and just small band groups, and making a metaphoric comparison between that and a lifeboat, and then the network of small band groups who all trade together. And you not only share within your group, but share between groups, and just like seeing in my mind's eye kind of that vast network of resilience builders who have all these skills to share in a reciprocal way. And like, I see the vision, and it's beautiful to me. And yeah, amazing research project is my observation. Pass to Roland.
I think I'm going to come back and listen to this again. Justin, I think what you just said is spot on in describing what the lifeboat network is. The lifeboat being what you're calling small bands, and then these small bands are interconnected and can share. Yeah, I love that. So I'll come back and I'll listen to it and see if there's anything there that I will ask to use. And that's my comment. Over to you, Ben.
Yeah, I agree. That was a fantastic restatement. At some point, if we haven't already, we'll have an extensive conversation about Dunbar numbers and the math of networks of networks. Cool. All right. Well then, so let's move into the badge proposal. And obviously in the, when we were doing our annual planning, we were seeing both of these as sort of symbiotic, that there's a relationship between the two. And one of the questions to us today as a guild is, how do we move forward? Like where do we start? What makes sense as next steps? And the badge proposal, I was actually going to bring up, I'm going to stop the share here, and I'm going to go over to the document itself. And because I sent that around, and I just wanted to make sure that we kind of are all literally on the same page. And I don't know what your technology is there, but I'm going to include the link in the chat in case anyone wants to be looking at the document itself. And the origin of the badging system really came out of the farm and woofers, having woofers here. And it became really obvious to Roland and I that we were making the mistake of assuming that people knew things. So like and trusting when people said they know how to weed a garden, and we would say, oh, well, cool, go weed the carrots. And then we would lose half the carrots, And so it became clear that we needed a little bit more form around how we were assessing other people's abilities in some very concrete ways. And the obvious and easy solution was the sharing system, where basically you work with somebody, you show them how you do it until they feel comfortable, and then you watch how they do it and make sure that it's meeting, the standards that we have. And then as we started to, think about that, it became really obvious that that's a good way of skill sharing, and has all of these other sort of potential benefits. And one is just to make it clear what skills people have, because it's not always obvious. People don't come in with a resume and kind of go, here are my 27 marketable skills. And so a lot of times there are skills that people have that you just don't even realize are there. And how to make it really easy for people to learn from each other and to turn to each other. So if we know that people have skills in an area, it's really easy to tap them on the shoulder and ask them to help out with things. So that was kind of the motivation behind it. And then in doing some gathering considerations, there's a whole whack of logistics kinds of questions, like how do you keep it from not being overwhelming, just like a huge long laundry list? How do you make sure that it stays up to date, that it's understandable, that it's usable, a lot of those kind of how the rubber hits the road kind of questions. And I think that's really pretty much all of that background stuff. And in particular, the role for this guild, all of the guilds are expected to develop their own skills list, but this guild in particular is tasked with figuring out how we organize that. So we don't have to come up with all the skills, but we need to come up with a system that makes it manageable for people to identify the skills that we're talking about. And that's, for me, one of the big connections then is I also think that might be a product of the research project of, between the networks. If we're starting to identify what are the skills that get shared in that network, and who is it that you can turn to who have those shares. So it could be, I'm thinking that we kind of prototype it in the Lifeboat Academy, and then if it's working, it's something we could invite other people to start adding to. So the proposal, I'm going to do a quick on the high level proposal, and then we'll do questions to make sure that questions for clarification, just to make sure that that's clear, and then we can get into actually kind of what comes next. Right, so I mentioned this already. Each guild comes up with its own badges, but we come up with a process that makes it kind of even across the different guilds. And we thought through, this is all proposal, right? So this is all subject to refinement as we move forward. But when we did our gathering considerations, ideally it would be nice if, so a badge represents a skill, and that skill probably has 3 to 6 specific activities that are part of it. So that there are, that the badge kind of gathers together a few activities into a set. And ideally there would be some sort of observable tokens of when people are doing that skill in a good way. So there's something observable about it. And conversely, there could also be some signs that it's not being done properly, which is also a sign that it is done properly, by the obverse. And again, we're trying to break it down so that it's as kind of as concrete and specific as possible. And that each skill, each badge would have a instructions that come with it, but the instructions are not meant to be the complete manual. They're really more like a checklist, and they can reference if there's sort of more refined information necessary. But the instructions are really just meant to be like, here's what's it's really about expectations more than the nitty-gritty of everything. It's really about establishing sort of shared expectations about what doing this task looks like. And that we also, each of the badges has a beginner, intermediate, advanced kind of level to it, because we recognize there are lots of things that are really quite simple skills, and then there are some things that are much more, you need more experience or to make sure that you can do it right. And then as part of that, the initial work is identifying people who are already in the network who already have those skills, that they could then be the people who train others. And then in terms of the process, it really is, it's people shadow somebody who already has the badge until they feel comfortable. Then the trainer shadows that person doing it until everyone feels comfortable. And then after that, the first couple times, and right now we're just saying the first 3 times, there's a follow-up. So you get to go off and do it independently, and then somebody, double checks to make sure that everything got done. And then the last is there's an encouragement to, once you learn something, that you train somebody. With an understanding that it's not just about promoting that, getting more people trained, but it's also a really good way of anchoring in the learning that you've just done. So that's the how. And then in terms of sort of how this would roll out, that once we develop a framework that we all agree to, that each of the guilds would come up with their skill sets. So again, the guilds are responsible for identifying the skills. And then we would figure out, we as the Curiosity Guild would figure out how to track all of that, whatever this database spreadsheet, whatever that might look like. And just a list of some of the things that we think would be necessary to have in that database, which is really just everything that we listed above. And then treating everything as an experiment. Once the guilds come up with their skills list, we identify a couple people that want to learn a few skills, and we just kind of walk through the process and see how it works. And then we debrief. And that's the gist of it. And so at this point, I'm going to go around again for questions for clarification. So any questions about what's being proposed, where we are in the process, or anything like that? Over to you, Angie.
I pass to Justin.
And I don't have any questions at the moment. I'll pass to Roland.
No questions, and these are good bones, I think.
Well then, now we get into the meat of it, which is so what are we going to do next? And I'm going to propose that we keep it focused on the badge system, but loosely so. So sorry, to be very clear and explicit, I'm proposing that we do gathering considerations about next steps. And so what are things that we want to keep in mind as we are figuring out how to move forward on the work of this guild, which I'm suggesting is probably easiest to start with the badging proposal, but might also involve something to do with the research proposal. So our gathering considerations, it's brainstorming rules apply, so it's all good for the cause. Can be concerns, hopes, ideas, questions, really anything that seems relevant to, how do we think through our next steps? And generally we find that it works better if you try to hold to one. We'll do multiple rounds, but one consideration per round, not a laundry list. And that just makes it easier for other people to build on the ideas as we move forward. So gathering considerations around next steps for the Curiosity Club. And as also with our process, you can always pass, and we'll just keep coming multiple rounds until people feel like they've gotten out what they need to get out. So Angie, over to you.
Is there a place where the badges are listed and the process is like thoroughly written out for people to explore? Because I'm finding, for me, I'm a very like visual learner. I'm very visually curious. And I wouldn't necessarily know which badges I would like to go for unless I've kind of seen a list, if that makes sense. I pass to Justin. Bless you.
Yeah, I'm thinking like this is a good system to make learning or education part of like everyday life. Pass to Roland.
Along with a place where there's a list of badges, also having a glossary of terms, like what do we mean? What's the difference between a badge and a token, and how do they interact? So over to you, Ben.
And in answer to your question, there is no list of badges yet. That's actually what we're in the process of developing. And the document that I just showed you is the closest we have to something describing the process. So that's kind of the raw material that we have to work with. And so some of the considerations are like, and one of the concerns in the proposal is, how do we have a list that is, because it could get really long. Like we started to do it with the farm, and we have chicken skills and goat skills and garden skills and cooking skills, and each of those has, things under them. So that's one of the challenges, is figuring out like visually how to organize it so that it's not overwhelming, and but is still useful. So that's my consideration. Back over to you, Angie.
I think I have some trauma around the process in which we're talking about, because I was a piercer at one point, and in my training, my mentor wasn't always there for me. So I don't know. It's just a concern that's coming up for me in terms of, what's alive for me. Is that my mentor wasn't always there. So when I wanted to learn, I wasn't always able to learn. And when I did feel ready, I didn't feel that they were able to make the decision whether I was ready or not, because they weren't always around. I pass to Justin.
I don't know if it's like gathering a consideration, but I'm just reflecting on a component of the evolvedness being self-directed free play. And that's kind of how a mammal, they play at what they're going to need to do as an adult. And that's kind of how they learn. And that, how does... Pass to Roland.
You're muted.
I was just reflecting on the importance of being a knowledge keeper, and that's one of the terms maybe for the glossary. The way that I'm identifying a knowledge keeper is someone who has had experience that they can that they can use to learn, teach, or improve. So what did as an example, if it's all right, I'll use the example that Angie provided. Knowing what your experience was, what did you learn from that would be that you'd want to pass on, and that experience informs how we can shape the badging system in such a way that it reduces instead of increases suffering. So over to you, Ben.
Yeah, I was thinking in a similar way, and I think two of the things that we have here, and I wonder how this gets. So in the proposal right now, there is an encouragement that you shadow more than one person. So there isn't a single mentor that would be responsible. In part to deal with that, in part also because different people can accomplish the same thing in different ways and it still gets accomplished. So it's, kind of to avoid this idea that it has to be done like in a particular way. And I'm thinking also the tokens, like having something in there where you can kind of see your own signs. Well, and actually now I'm thinking about what Justin was saying. That's resonates really well, that this should be playful. And at the same time, there are kind of the standards, it's like, so there's play, and part of play is knowing how you get points. What do you get points for and what do you lose points for? But still keeping that spirit of playfulness. Yeah, and I guess it's also, I think that's more than one consideration. So the consideration I'm adding is it is how can we lean into the multiple, like it's not one mentor, that's a shared, and every time you share a responsibility, there's a danger of it getting too diffused. So where's that balance between knowing who to turn to and making sure that the people that you turn to are actually capable of supporting you? Yeah, back to you, Angie.
Angie has the baby. We're just at nap time, but not quite there. So she's still refusing to sleep, but getting tired. It's still reflecting on like just the process that you came up with and using like not to be a broken record, but like a millions of years baseline for humans, and like how was it done then in an ancestral context? Like how did a developing human child grow into an adult who knew how to exist in that environment? And I can see like a mimicking that process, and the shadowing is like you're just watching someone do something who knows how to do it and do it well, and then you try it yourself. Just reflecting on that process, and like I still don't think I'm adding anything, and I'm a bit distracted, but yeah, I don't think I have anything to add other than just reflecting myself, pass her along.
I don't know that I have anything to add. It might be useful for me to get a refresher on this, on the gathering considerations. Because I get sometimes with this process, I listen to what people are saying, but then I forget what I'm commenting on, what the over why we're having the conversation.
Well, no, I think that's really useful. And
Yeah.
I will also say, so one of the tools that I think is in the skill bank is called that I learned, and it's called psychological inoculation. And it's basically letting people know, like, my experience of circle process is it often feels muddier before it feels clearer. Things sort of get more confusing before they start to get less confusing. And we're all circle keepers, so asking the question, Roland, is really good. So a token a token for we're all circle keepers. And ultimately, we are trying to come up with where do we go from here? So what are the actions as a guild we want to take to move forward on putting this badging system into practice? So ultimately, we are trying to get to what are the next steps? What are the concrete actions that we're going to take? So hopefully that helps in the framing. And I want to give a token to our young family, and because I think the fact that you're still here, and I know it must be kind of stressful feeling this, sort of distracted attention, but I think this is great, and I admire the extra attention, the extra intellectual capacity that it's taking to sort of be able to split your attention this way. So I think mostly I want to say I hope you don't feel at all bad that this is good. This is really good. I'm how do I want to say it? We are walking our talk, and we are creating living systems that are responsive to where we actually are and what is actually going on. And we are keeping the work that we're doing together in perspective. So kudos for you for showing up, and I appreciate whatever attention you can give. And I also appreciate that Fee is driving the show, and that's as it should be. So, and in terms of next steps, I feel like, so getting more kind of brass tacks, the obvious opportunity here is that Heartwork is currently in the process of developing skills, a list of skills. So there's the Miro board that starts to have the tasks on, the sort of the concrete skills on one side and the abstract stuff on the other. So I really feel like that's the biggest opportunity for us to try to, like, how do we, if we were just going to develop this list just for Heartwork, what would that look like? And, what's a good enough for now place to start? So, and I'm not saying that that's the only solution or even the best solution, but it is the one that kind of seems most obvious as a starting point. So with that, I guess I will pass to Justin until Angie comes back.
Yeah, so I was just like kind of thinking of how education is part of everyday life, and just having your person that is a potential mentor walking through their day and kind of rating things like maybe on a 1 to 3 of like, okay, this is a skill everyone needs or everyone knows. So like that's not something we would have a badge about. And then maybe number 2 is yeah, in the middle. And number 3 is like this is a very like specialized skill that might be very complicated and take a longer period to learn. So like a different rating system for skills that might be more sophisticated versus skills that you might learn quicker. And yeah, just kind of maybe doing a practice or an exercise where you're going through your day and saying to yourself, okay, I just did a skill that might be this category, and there could be a badge for that. So like just going through your day making badges, but then I don't know, like we talked about not having like a massive overwhelming list of things, but maybe doing that as a process and then filtering it through another something or other past to Rolon.
I keep muting myself because I think I've muted myself before, and then I click anyway. I think that there's also the assessing aptitude. Some people are very quick at learning very complex things that are manual, and some people are very quick at learning very complex things that are more intellectual. And making it, how to make a, is there a way of making allowances for that, or is it just through the observation? And I'm going to say one more thing while I'm thinking about it. There's also the mentorship. I think of the mentorship as being distributed, and if the mentorship is distributed, then how to compare, how to know when a mentee has passed, especially for the more complex things. I mean, for if there is going to be a badge for opening and closing the chickens, that's really not a big deal. You know, even someone with mediocre chicken skills would be able to know, yes, you've closed the door. Yes, you've made sure the chickens are all inside. But then there are the more complex things like facilitation, and circle keeping, and assessing illness, assessing health in animal or vegetable. Those are all more sort of complex, and yeah, and I think that with the distributed mentorship, it's also not getting away from this idea that any one person is a complete expert and knows everything in something, but rather bringing forward that we all have aptitudes, knowledge, and skills that are more or less developed, and the weaving our strengths together so that our weaknesses become irrelevant kind of thing. So over to you, Ben.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking as you were talking, is that we're trying to develop a collaborative culture. When we first started talking about this, we were using the language of guilds and peers, masters and peers. And it really, partly actually early on, it was who can really be participating in some of these more complex decisions, because we wanted to make sure that it's one thing to encourage people to engage and participate, but there's also the risk of people surpassing their capacity, like trying to make decisions in areas where they really shouldn't. And especially, we've got animals, and actually there's lots of ways in which harm can happen. And so how do we make sure that we're minimizing the risk of harm for people, kind of overestimating their abilities? But I think my consideration is it can be a little bit of a get out of jail free card to say, oh, but we'll have a collaborative culture, so everyone will always be, open, like we'll be engaging in collaboration to make these decisions. The sociocracy rules still apply. So anyone affected by a decision has the ability to shape that decision, and anyone with an objection is, encouraged to voice the objection. So this doesn't change any of that. It just kind of adds another layer. Yeah, so I think my consideration is, in theory, that collaborative culture means we don't have to worry too much about somebody overestimating their abilities, but then how do we build it in so that it is, not just an afterthought? Over to you, Justin.
Yeah, I'm still feeling in the muddy part and rambling a bit. But yeah, I was thinking last year I said it's you if you see yourself as a mentor and then go through your day thinking about skills that you could teach that could be a badge, but also seeing yourself as a student and going through your day and just wondering about the skills that you would need to build and maintain a lifeboat and um, what those would be. Just like as an example, I mean, I don't consider myself a very practical person and too full of theory and don't have enough skills. So thinking about this process is like, yeah, another thing. Like I see it as it would be a very beneficial system, and just like wanting to learn things like natural building, and kind of like seeing that, oh, I want to do things locally, and it's really hard to go to Home Hardware and get building materials, but the people that have those skills or that would have those badges like are hard to find or are non-existent, like those skills have like fallen away. Yeah, and like another example coming straight to home is like one of the Secwepemc elders here, um, Jensen is his name. He said like his culture had forgotten how to use a bow because they adopted guns as soon as they were made available, and basically in one generation like the bow went away, and so he had to like reteach himself that skill. So yeah, just thinking about going through my day and seeing like, okay, here's a bunch of skills that would be useful, but I'm not sure if anyone is capable of teaching them, or like how are we going to learn something that no one knows yet. um, yeah, I'm just riffing now, but I'll pass to Roland.
I'm not muted, by the way. I can just talk. Ay, ay, ay. Well, that's making me think about, uh, you know, uh, people come and go, such as life, and so the skills list will continue, will shift. As people come, presumably with new skills, presumably those skills will be shared, and so it won't be only the one person who has that skill. And that's part of the benefit of having the badging system. Oh, tracking, that's the other thing. Part of the benefits of having a badging system is that we can also get a sense through some form of tracking of not only what we have, but where we have, you know, I always think that more than one person knowing something is good because it helps to keep that knowledge alive. Like no one, people forgot how to use the bow and arrow because of guns, and we keep hearing of even in Europe, people with traditional skills being the last one who knows how to make the bentwood baskets in whatever country. And looking for apprentices, people who will learn and continue the craft. So, if everybody learns how to open the chickens and nobody learns how to feed the goats, or only one person knows how to feed the goats and that person goes away, then you know then what do we do? So having a tracking system also helps to say, hey, there's not a lot of people who are learning how to feed the goats, And who would like to shore up that weak spot? I was also thinking about what individually can we offer, and starting there as a place to start to figure out what badges we have. I'm proposing that instead of imagining what badges we would like to have. But there is a place for aspiration. So it may be that somewhere for skills we don't have that we want to acquire go. Because I'm also thinking, I don't know what badges would be needed, for example, for natural building. You know, is it just a natural building badge, or are there steps? So starting with what we've got and the knowledge that the Lifeboat Academy currently has, and working out badges that way with this growing, can I say compendium? I want to use the word compendium because it's a lovely word, but I don't know if it's the right word to use, of a growing compendium of badges, that yeah, this sort of accretion of skills as people come and go. And I have to say, there's really a place for creativity and in there, because I feel like I've learned a lot, not from a person, but from research and experience and experimentation. So there are ways where we can acquire skills, other than having an individual who can impart the knowledge. So that was way more than one thing, and it just felt like I needed to keep track of where I was going. And so it was a little meandering. Over to you, Ben.
Yeah, and I'm also noticing the time, so we should probably wrap up. And but I wanted to, I have strong feelings around this, which is, I do not want this to be an aspirational laundry list of imagining every skill you might need for a homestead. It's actually, what do we need to actually get things done? And I think there is a place for the aspiration in there, but I think it would just be too overwhelming and a waste of time, actually, to try to list all the skills necessary to do everything. Because I mean, that's the internet. You know, it's sort of like, you know, we could want to do natural dyes, and we could want to know how to, you know, spin nettle, and all of those are potentially interesting projects, but right now we don't have the time to do any of them. So spending the time developing a badge for something that isn't actually part of our everyday, I think would just be a red herring. And it makes me think of, I like Justin's idea of kind of going through what are the things that need to happen to keep the place afloat, and then, you know, breaking them down. And I think that's what Heartwork was doing, right? Is we were looking from our experience in the groups and saying, what are some of the things that we did that made a difference? And those are the skills that we've identified. And so starting where, I guess that's also maybe the broader consideration is, how do we make this not a credentialing system that makes people think you're supposed to know everything? Because I feel like that's just one of the the traps of modernity, is this idea,
Mhm.
or somebody's the expert, so we defer to them because we've got our expert over there, and no one can say anything about the chickens because Roland's got his chicken thing, and so yeah, I think there is something about well, and actually that's just a kind of a ditto around a lot of Justin's points about how has this traditionally been done, and um, and I think also that collaborative culture. How do we make sure that that's what I'm going to put. And what's the word I want to use? Sort of uh, April was using the word sovereignty, and it's fresh in my mind, but it's kind of this, how do we remain sovereigns and not, that's not right in this context. Um, but there's still something about that, like how does the system not reinforce hierarchy? You know? Um, all right. So in the interest of time, since we're kind of at the end here, I'm going to propose 2 rounds to close us out. One is last considerations before we wrap this up, knowing we're going to come back to it at our next meeting and continue on. So that's the first round. And then the second round, last thoughts for the good of the cause and just an opportunity to check out. So Angie and/or Justin, whoever might be available, any final considerations here?
Yeah, I'll try to say this quickly, but I'm just channeling Roland's flower from the other day, the plantain, and I feel like this is like the work of cultural transmission, um, but we're a pioneering culture, not an old growth culture. So these badges are like how to be a good plantain. And we often get like humans are horrible because everywhere they migrated the megafauna died out, and that's like kind of an example of it's difficult to pioneer a culture, like to move to a new place and try to exist in it, and you make mistakes when you're new. um, yeah, and just the cultural transmission piece, where that's like a lot of how humans get into trouble, is like losing that cultural transmission. And you could see it with like the germs that came to North America, supposedly killing like up to 90%. And you could see how devastating that would have been for sharing the skills necessary to exist in a place, and how um, a lot of the contact made and the missionary writings of the peoples they met were struggling in that way, I guess. Um, I don't know what that has to do with anything, but just trying to be badge for good plantainness past Roland.
I like that. I want a plantain badge. Um, it's such a lovely analogy, Anyway, and Justin, I don't think that you can ever say too much about anything having to do with evolutionary biology or psychology. I never had the terms before, but I think that's where I have been living. Like, what would my far ancestors actually be doing with this right now as part of trying to figure out where, as a human organism, do I actually fit into this ecosystem? How can I be plantain for this ecosystem? So you don't, to me, you don't have to apologize if ever you come back to that stuff. That that is it makes sense to live in that place for me. And I feel like we're still, I don't know that I have a sense of the shape of things yet. I think that there's some really interesting things that have come through today, and we still have a little ways. I feel like we still have a bit of a ways to go before that coalescing happens. Over to you, Ben.
Yeah, I do too, and I don't think that's not a problem, you know. Um, I mean, this is the second meeting of the Curiosity Club, aka Research and Learning Guild, right? So it's going to take us a while. Um, and I also, and that's my other psychological inoculation. It was actually a comment that was made yesterday in the Network of Networks meeting that I attended, which is networks are really slow to get going and then super fast. And there's that go slow to go fast, and we can take a little time wandering around some of these ideas, and then when they start to come together, they come together in a really good way, and it feels like movement happens. So um, yeah, I feel like in terms of next steps, I'm thinking right now our next step is 2 weeks from now, we'll come back to this conversation and we'll see how the ideas have evolved. And and then until then, we'll just let things kind of, perk in the background. Um, so does anyone else have any other next steps that you want to get on the list that we're missing other than sleep on it? No one's jumping forward, so it's good enough for me. And so yeah, so now basically just an opportunity to check out. So last thoughts for the good of the cause. Over to you, Justin.
Yeah, I will like briefly comment on my own insecurity of repeating the same stuff over and over again. And yeah, I guess just I don't know, after a while it doesn't seem to land well. So I like have to reinvent how to say something or use different language or something. Um, that's my own insecurity apologizing, but this seems like a beautiful process, and like it's very stimulating for me, especially thinking of like Ophelia's education and reading stuff like Peter Gray's Free to Learn, and just like reimagining, how we go about learning all the skills we need to be adults in this environment, in this troubled time. Yeah, and thank you both, and gratitude for this circle. Pass to Roland.
Well, and if I can bring Bill Plotkin in this, as a society, we're not adults. According to him in his ecological psychology work, we haven't even reached adolescence. And so play is super important. And I think that we have not only forgotten how, but we denigrate actual play, and we mistake it with leisure, which is actually a 19th century invention. So I want to play at this and play as a way of learning. So keeping it playful is actually really practical. Over to Ben.
Yeah, ditto. And Justin, you have no fear because Roland and I will we lead the vanguard of we keep saying the same stuff again
Yeah.
and again and again in different language. And so if people can't handle that with us, we've cleared the room. So anyone who's left in the room is okay with people talking big ideas and
I'm gonna popcorn because I just realized we also have an agreement of frequent reminders. And that means that we keep repeating the same things over and over again, because in going into things, we've come to see that, you know, in trying to figure out how to live well during the day, there are actually really just a few really simple principles that we keep coming back to all the time. So this thing about we have to be original, we have to have new ideas is really misleading. I think it's more how do we reassemble ourselves? How do we rediscover parts that we have been pushing away? And it's this weird kind of way wu way thing of no, it's not we it's paradoxical.
Mhm.
There, I popcorned. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, and
Back to circle.
I'm gonna ditto on that because it's one of the things we say is learning to unlearn to relearn, and we're talking about a pioneer culture. It's also that means we have to unlearn all of these bad habits to make space for the good habits that we want to start to develop. And that just takes repetition and bringing ourselves back to it doesn't have to be like this. You know, like that's one of the reminders of it's just so easy to fall into the like I think even here, I think we have a tendency even though we're, you know, theoretically we're all on the same page, we start talking about badges and it's really easy to start to think we need the complete universal list of all of the badges and we need and who's the expert who's gonna, you know, ensure that it's right. And it's just so easy to fall back into those old habits. So yeah, frequent reminders and as long as we keep it playful. So, you know, that reminder that if you're giving advice, you're giving it to yourself. And if it's useful for other people in the room, then that's just a bonus. But um, keeping it all light and playful. Anyhow, I feel like we are at the end of our time together. And so onward and upward. And we'll be back together in this guild in 2 weeks.
Can I quickly throw in one more resource on the whole adolescence? It's Nature and Madness by Paul Shepard. He makes the argument like we have like psychological neoteny, where we're pulling like very juvenile characteristics into adulthood, but it's on like the same theme, and like I hear that a lot in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, well, look at the current administration in the US. It's like 2-year-olds having tantrums. You know, it's yep. Anyhow, before we get into that,
Yeah.
I'm going
Thanks again.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye now.